Hey guys, Rich here. This is my long overdue video for the tail tidy on my Honda CRF450L. And I didn't shoot any actual video during the process of putting together this tail tidy since I was basically kind of prototyping it as I went. But I did take a whole bunch of still pictures and including all of the measurements as well. So the majority of this video is going to be me just walking through those still pictures with the measurements and guiding you through the steps to complete this. But I did this last fall and I've ridden this bike quite a bit since, both on the street at high speed as well as on really rocky single track, and nothing's moved at all. It's a very sturdy setup. You don't hear any rattling around in the back. Everything has been completely solid. It's got a nice clean look. And probably most importantly, it costs almost $0 to do. I did use two small pieces of aluminum to make sort of these little angle brackets that come over to the plate, but you could do that with scrap left over from the original assembly on the back of the bike, or you could just use some off-the-shelf angle brackets. That and like two machine screws, two Nyloc nuts, and 4 washers. So cost to do this is very low, and if you do projects like this on a regular basis, you probably have all the materials laying around to do it already. As I mentioned in the title of the video, I'm going to be doing a giveaway as well. That information will be at the end of the video. It's going to be a pretty cool camera, so stay tuned. And with that, let's get into the actual process of doing the tail tidy.
Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is remove this whole assembly from the rear of the bike, and this mounts underneath the rear fender. And I've already taken my license plate off of here, but normally the license plate would sit on this bracket back here. Now you do have to take apart essentially you've got to take off the top of the rear fender to get this out, because this plugs in inside of there. You could snip the wires. I would not recommend that. Take the time to do it right. And I've got that whole procedure covered in another video that I posted a bit ago called the Honda CRF450L Skaggs Moto Tail Rack Install. I'll make sure that gets linked down below. But the beginning of that video essentially covers taking off the seat, taking off the top of the rear fender, and then removing the 4 bolts to drop this bracket. So that's all covered there. And I weighed this, and this whole assembly here, the whole thing, without the license plate, mind you, weighs 1 pound 5.2 ounces. So what we're going to do is essentially cut off this whole rear section of the assembly. And I want to say Honda did a decent job designing this. It's not as hideous as what I've seen on a lot of other bikes stock. It's pretty clean, but it's still, if you're going for that enduro look, it's way more stuff than you need back there. So we're basically gonna cut the majority of this off. And you can't see it. I've got it. Well, you can see it a little bit in here. I do have this marked, a radius that I'm going to cut here. I have a better detail of that in the next picture. But you could make this cut with just about anything. I used one of those like smaller battery-powered sawzalls. I found that for this type of cut, it just gives you a lot of control. But you could cut this with a hacksaw. You could cut this with just about anything. Aluminum is fairly easy to cut. So here's the actual dimension and how you want to mark this guy. So this 37 millimeters is the measurement from the edge of this radius here on sort of this slot. You can see it better. Here's the whole other side. So we're measuring from the edge of this radius down this direction to the edge of the radius that you're marking. Now I marked this radius with a large fender washer. You could use a regular washer, or you could use a small bottle, anything that gives you sort of that nice radius. And when you make your cut, don't actually cut all the way to that radius that is your finished dimension. You want to finish that with like either a sander or a file or something like that. I actually got a little close with this one when I cut the other side. Let me skip ahead one. Yeah, see, this is the other side. You could see I left a little bit more material on that one, and I cleaned this up on a belt sander. But so this, everything that we cut off, the whole assembly that you're going to take off, weighs 1 pound, which is, a pretty substantial weight savings given it is as high on the bike as it is, and then also so far back behind the rear axle. So, like I mentioned, leave yourself some extra meat there, and then finish this up on either a belt sander or finish it up with a file and a sander. A file would do just fine. I do a fair amount of work with aluminum like this, and wood as well. And if you do and you don't own one of these belt sanders, they really are great. This Grizzly one's okay. There's actually a Wen, W-E-N, branded one that I've been recommending to folks more because it's, number one, it's available on Amazon, so if you've got Prime it just shows up next day, and it's actually a couple bucks cheaper than what I paid for this Grizzly. I'll link that down below if you're interested. And there we go. Now you can see I've just ground that down to right at the edge of what I have marked as my radius. And this was a rough center point marking. I'll show you how to properly mark these in a future slide. But here's both of these cut and ground down to the final radius. And take your time on this. This type of work, taking the time to properly mark this radius and then grind it down to that exact radius is the difference between it looking like a hack job and it looking like an aftermarket part that you actually bought for your bike. So take the time on this type of work. And these pieces alone weigh 4.6 ounces, and that makes up, by the way, the majority of the weight. We're going to add a little bit of hardware and 2 other small aluminum pieces to this, but in total they probably are not more than another ounce. So here's how you want to mark those center spots that we're going to drill for that hardware. And again, I'm using that same fender washer. You could use a regular washer and just approximate the center location of the hole, but you want to use the washer so that you're getting the holes consistently marked on each of the pieces. And you can see here I've got the spot where I'm going to drill marked on each one of these now. And aluminum is fairly soft. You probably could just kind of push the drill bit in and go for it, and it's not going to walk around. If you have a center punch, I'd recommend using that, and that's what I did here. I just center punched each one of these to make sure that as I drill these, the bit doesn't walk around on the material and not end up in the center. And I mentioned we're going to need some hardware. This is the stuff you're going to use. I picked these up at Lowe's for another project. I had these on hand. But I'll put some links down below to where you can grab these from Amazon. If you do want to grab them from Lowe's, you can just note the numbers here. These are available right in their hardware aisle. But it's an 832 3/4 panhead Phillips machine screw, 832 Nyloc nuts, and then we're also going to need some numbered 10 flat washers as well. Notice that all of this is stainless steel. If you've got hardware on hand just to get this job done, go ahead and use that, but I would strongly recommend ultimately using stainless steel for this. This is a part of the bike that's going to get whacked with wet mud and stuff all the time. It is eventually going to corrode if you use just regular hardware. Yes, I'm aware there is a minor interaction between stainless steel and aluminum over a long period of time. I can tell you I've used stainless steel hardware on aluminum parts I've made for bikes for years. I've never seen any noticeable corrosion other than just a little bit of discoloration. Okay, so here we are. We're drilling out those holes and size your drill bit to basically a tiny bit above the diameter of your bolts. You want a little bit of play there just so you can move it. You don't want so much play that you're going to end up having a hard time centering it on each side. So once you've got both of those drilled out, your part should look very similar to this. And you can see I've got the hardware here as well. And at this point you can get these 2 pieces mounted back up on the bike. And I don't have my top fender reinstalled at this point because I had some other work I was going to do on the bike. But we're done inside this section up here. So you can have your rear fender reinstalled. And here's just a couple different views of what this looks like. You can see these would eventually come to a point if they were long enough back here. They angle sort of inwards. Now, I cut the next 2 pieces that we need out of just a piece of aluminum flat stock I had laying around from another project. There's actually enough scrap aluminum on those parts that we cut off that you could use that. You might not hit these exact dimensions, but you could make it from that leftover material. I used a thinner piece, as this part that we're making, it doesn't need to be as thick as that material. And you can pick up this aluminum flat stock either online or from Lowe's as well. I'll find a piece that would give you enough material to work with and link that below as well. But these are the dimensions you want to cut out: 78 millimeters by 26 millimeters. And you're going to need two of these. I was prototyping this as I was going, so I only cut one to start. But go ahead and cut two pieces, 78 millimeters by 26 millimeters. And then you're going to want to bend this at 90 degrees. And you're going to want to do that roughly at 45 millimeters. Depending on how you bend it, this dimension might be slightly different, but you want to end up with essentially the longer side of your finished piece at about 45 millimeters. So here we are bent. So what I'm saying is this longer section here, roughly if you were to measure from like this face to the tip over here, this should be about 45 millimeters. And this is sort of me just testing where this would sit back here. You can see I've got a clamp just holding the license plate down straight onto the top face of this arm over here. And I'm just holding this here for two reasons. Number one, to mark the hole here where I'm going to drill. And my thumb's blocking it, but I also marked the curve of sort of that outer radius onto this piece so that I could trim that, because it's not necessary. You just have a corner piece of material sticking out down here. If we don't trim that off, it's going to look a lot cleaner if we trim that. And in fact, you can see now what that looks like on this finished piece. See, we have that nice radius ground in here, and I have the hole that I marked drilled in here. And you're going to use the same size drill bit that you drilled the other brackets with. And I marked up my other piece now. It's that same 78 millimeters by 26 millimeters. And I've got my second one cut, second one ground and drilled. And now I've installed these on these two arms. Now notice I did not drill the holes yet for the license plate. You can tweak the angle of these guys a little bit to determine how much, sort of the angle that you want the plate sitting at, basically like how much it's angled back. Make sure you get all that set just with the plate clamped on here and you're fully satisfied with it before you drill the holes, because as you move these pieces, because these guys kind of come back towards each other, as you angle these, the distance between these holes is going to change a little bit. So here's a side view of that hardware. So you have your machine screw washer, and then going through this plate, then this plate, and then another washer, and your Nyloc nut. Once you're satisfied with all that, go ahead and hold your plate on here. If you have a set of clamps, like a small set of C-clamps or a small set of some other type of clamps, or even tape, get the plate on. Make sure you're satisfied with the position, because there's no going back from this point. But once you're satisfied with it, go ahead and use the plate itself to mark the holes that you're going to drill in those brackets. And this is after I've marked those holes and drilled them. Installed those back on the bike, and now you can see the other side. You can see that I have a washer inside that Nyloc nut, and there's enough beef here left over. You could probably go with a 1/2 inch instead of a 3/4. Again, 3/4 is what I had on hand, and 3/4 is definitely long enough. But looking at this picture, you could probably go with 1/2 inch machine screws. I also notice here I also trimmed the corners of these guys up here, since they would actually protrude past the edge of the plate itself. And there we go. There's the plate installed on there, and I used the same hardware that came with the bike. It's a nice set of, I guess it's probably nylon fasteners, so they're not going to corrode either. And there's just a couple different angles of view. And you can see from the bottom. And I tell you, this really does, if you take the time again on all these cuts and grinds, it really has a clean look to it. I've had a number of people come up to me and say, "Hey, where did you buy that?" They can't believe it's the stock parts that came on the bike, just modified. Now, so rules vary by state. If you notice, we basically, in the process of doing this, we took off the light that illuminates the plate. I'm in Pennsylvania, clearly. You can see that from my plate. I think Pennsylvania does require a specific light that illuminates the license plate. We no longer have one with this mod. However, this shot is taken at night with the lights off in my garage and no flash on the camera. And you can see that plate is very well illuminated by the rear running light. That's not the brake on, that's just what how bright that light is as a running light at night. I don't ride that much at night. I would really be surprised if a cop stopped me for the plate not being illuminated, because it is actually very well illuminated, and I don't know how specific the laws are as to whether you do need a clear lens. I'm sure it varies state by state. It wouldn't be too difficult to add one. If this fender was popped off, you could see, but where that plug was that we disconnected the rear light, you could plug in any 12 volt LED, so you could add an LED strip to the bottom of the tail light, or ideally someone will come out with an aftermarket tail light that would be a direct swap for the Honda one that just had a section of clear lens at the bottom. I know that's how a lot of the aftermarket lights get away with that, but you can see it is actually very well illuminated just with the stock setup. And that's it. That brings us back to the beginning. All in all, this project probably took me about an hour, but I was also designing it as I went. If you've watched this video from beginning to end and you use my measurements, you could probably get this done in 30 minutes. It does not take that long, and it really cleans up the back of the bike. I mean, I'm biased. I made it, but I think it looks really great.
So thanks as always for tuning in. And I mentioned at the beginning of this video I was going to be doing a giveaway, and this is going to be it. It's a Melcam little video camera, and it's meant for blogging. It's got the screen on the back that actually flips around like this. So when you're recording, you can see if you're in frame and see what other stuff is in frame. It's a nice little camera. It's a great starter unit to get folks into blogging, and I wanted to give something back to sort of the community in general. If you want to have the opportunity to win this, all you've got to do is hit the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, that's fine. Anybody that is a subscriber to my channel is going to be eligible to get this. And yeah, of course, this is kind of a ploy to get people to subscribe, right? I mean, that's what people do with these giveaways. But even if you're not interested in the camera, please hit the subscribe button. It helps let me know that you guys find these videos valuable and enjoy watching them, and motivates me to make more as I see that number go up. So whether you're interested in the camera or not, please consider subscribing. And thanks so much, especially to everyone that provides comments and feedback to the videos. I really appreciate it, and that's it for now.